Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So this is a disc I had from my childhood containing many shareware copies of various MS-DOS games from the time. The disc is dated 1994, which lets you know how long I've been a gamer for. Shareware was pretty much what it sounded like. People were allowed to share a demo of the game, which more often than not was the first third of the game. This would get the game into the public consciousness, along with the ordering information for the full game, if the player wanted to part with their money. Kind of the ultimate try before you buy. I'm going to go through all the games in this collection to give my thoughts on how they play now. Atch. So this is Argo Checkers. It's basically checkers, or drafts, or whatever you want to call it. This demo of the game only gives you the ability to play another human player, with no option to challenge the computer. This means that when playing the game, I found it really difficult to actually outright win as one side. The game also gives you the perspective of looking onto the board with the red counters near you. The board doesn't flip when the black counters take a turn, so it's almost like it's simulating you and your friend crouched down on the same side of the checkers board. The full version of this game comes with 3 levels of computer difficulty, which is a bit bizarre. Like, how good can you actually get at checkers? There's not really a whole lot to say about this game other than it's checkers. The only other thing of note is that there are 3 options for sound. One is off, one is Sound Blaster, which is basically realistic sound effects, and plays the beginning of the Superman theme when you turn your checker into a king. The PC speaker option sounds like Sweep from Sooty & Co. is rather angrily playing a game of checkers with Sooty. Astro. Next we have Astro. This is basically a nice graphical upgrade to Asteroids. If you look in the game menu, it gives you a bit of backstory talking about New Earth and Starfleet. Presumably you aren't Captain Sisko on the Defiant, or anyone else from Star Trek. The story really doesn't matter in this instance though, as it really is just asteroids. You get a few lives, a health bar, and a woo bar. When you blow up asteroids and defeat these flying no-studs, you can get little gems which either give you more health or fill up your woo bar. The woo bar, when charged, gives you stronger attacks. I died after about 10 minutes playing this game, but part of me wants to have a go a bit longer, which gives it points for being a pretty good arcade-style game. Jetpak. In Jetpak, you play as a little man on the square grid. The goal of each level is to gather all of these jelly-looking emeralds, and then get to the exit. You are given a jetpack at various points which allow you to fly for a limited time before your fuel runs out. This jetpack helps you get out of the way of enemies or fly to ledges you wouldn't otherwise be able to reach. To start with, the game gives you the illusion it's a platformer, but it's really another puzzle game. You have to avoid and sometimes freeze enemies to get past them, and sometimes their placement can result in a death trap. This robot, for example, hones in on your location, so if you decide to go into this little cave on the right and fly up, then he traps you. You also get Emperor Palpatine-esque lightning in this game, which you can use to break through some walls. Only certain walls are breakable though, so you need to work out which ones you can get past before you take a risk and get blocked in. Probably the best part of this game is the level editor. I spent ages and ages on this as a kid, and it was my first real exploration of level design. You can make any level you want as long as the main character and door are present. My favourite type of level to make was trapping the man in a little prison, giving him just enough time to escape via a colour transporter tile that both you and the enemies can use. The game also features coloured walls you can toggle off with a switch, and conveyor belts and ice platforms amongst other things. The possibilities are seemingly endless with this game, but it's pretty mortifying that 25 years after playing it, I still got stuck on the first 4 or 5 levels. Hexxagon. Hexxagon is a pretty unique puzzle game where you play on a floating purple hexagonal board in space. You can play as either the blue fishbowl things or the red gems. The goal is to cover more of a percentage of the board with your counters than the other player. If you move to the adjacent spot, your piece duplicates, giving you 2 counters, and if you jump over the space with your counter, it doesn't duplicate. You can take the other player's counters by landing next to them, and if you're clever or the other player is careless, you can take a multitude of counters around you. I played all 3 levels of the Craniac difficulty, but couldn't beat the last one. It seems like the optimal technique is to quickly monopolise one side of the board, so you can take a more pacifistic arm race style approach with the other player while they do whatever they're doing. This doesn't work out too well with Craniac Hard, who is far more aggressive and starts throwing attacks your way almost out of the gate. There's also an editing mode where you can change the board configuration by pumping holes in it, but I couldn't get this to work, presumably because this feature is for the full version of the game. The game also lets you play 2-player, but I have no friends who are insane enough to play a nearly 30-year-old PC board game with me, so I won't be doing that. Overall, this is a fine example of a game that could only really be made as a video game. I'm sure an equivalent game in the real world exists, but I imagine you'd spend most of the time arguing with your friend about how many of your tiles you should flip, and it'll be about half an hour of you flipping things over. It's a good laugh for about 20 minutes. Megatron. Megatron starts off promising with a really good opening piece of music, but that's where the game peaks. It's an early first-person game where you go around a maze as a robot type thing. You can choose another robot to enter the maze and fight you. I have no idea how to fight back, and the robot uses its explosive powers of PC noises to blow me up and then call me a loser. Night Raid. In Night Raid, you take charge of a small house with a cannon that has unlimited ammunition. For some reason, there is an entire army sought on destroying this house by any means necessary. They send paratrooper after paratrooper in. You lose points for every bullet fired, but if you let more than 2 paratroopers hit the ground at the end of the assault wave, then they walk very, very slowly to your house and blow it up when they are inside. This means the only real way to play this game is to just keep firing. You can get away with one guy reaching the ground as he gets whisked away by a UFO at the end of the wave he lands on. The first 3 waves are more of the same, and they are split up with a plane flying over saying, "Buy our game, buy our game, buy our game." The 4th attack wave introduces the rocket, which runs out of fuel about halfway across the screen. If this hits the ground, it's a literal game over, so the strategy of just launch bullets into the air with no constraints is still the winning one. At the end of the 4th wave, I finished the game with a whopping score of 1 point, and was treated with the final cutscene where a pizza delivery man delivers you a pizza and then drives off faster than literally any of the aircraft in the attack waves moved. Delightful 10-minute game if you want to just let off some steam. Puzzle. It's a puzzle game. Everything gets mixed up and I don't have the patience, and the frame of reference isn't there long enough for me to work out. I didn't want to waste my time, so screw this game, go and buy a real jigsaw instead. Wolf 3D. Oh, Wolfenstein 3D. The granddaddy of first-person shooters. How you've aged badly. This version of the game doesn't seem to want to play the iconic music, which is a shame as navigating the dull Wolfenstein prison corridors is made a bit more bearable with the music playing. In Wolfenstein, you play the part of BJ blah 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 after he kills a guard and makes his attempts to escape the prison. The game was undeniably groundbreaking for the time, and while it wasn't the first first-person shooter, it really set the template for the genre moving forward. The gameplay is very straightforward. You need to find a gold key to gain access to the lift to reach the next floor. This sounds simple enough, but the big problem here is there's no map. I spent loads of time in this game trying to find my way back to the lift after finding the key, and found no real sensible way to do this, as the environments are so samey. Using the rule of keeping the walls of the maze to the left or right doesn't really help either, as you end up on a loop which takes you around the same corridors you've seen time and time again. Eventually, after spending an eternity trying to find the key in level 4, I gave up. Wolfenstein 3D is an extremely influential game which was bettered by almost every shooter game that came after it. God of Thunder. I've already spoken about God of Thunder on this channel, so if you want more of an in-depth review, go and watch that. It's basically a puzzle game made to look like The Legend of Zelda. Instead of a sword, you have a boomerang-style hammer. The game is delightful, has a great soundtrack, and is still worth playing about 30 years after it came out, even if the final boss is pretty frustrating. Spear of Destiny. So this is the version of Wolfenstein 3D I remember playing the most as a kid. It's a 2-level demo, and overall feels much better than Wolf 3D. The environments are much more varied, and it's a lot easier to see where you've explored before. For example, on level 2, I remembered that the locked doors I found before locating the keys were behind this door with a danger sign in the main square of the level. The music works in this demo too, which makes the overall feel of the game much better. There's still no map, which would make this game a lot better, but the experience here was a lot more fine-tuned than the first Wolfenstein 3D game. And to be honest, I was quite disappointed when the game finished after the 2 levels. I might revisit this one. Squarez. So Squarez is an experimental version of Tetris. In Tetris, the idea is to drop various shapes made of 4 blocks to make lines which then disappear. It's addictive good fun with a banging soundtrack. Squarez is a bit different, as the shapes are completely insane. There's seemingly no way to flip them, and the idea is to make squares which disappear and make the screen bigger. I'd imagine if I spent a bit more time playing this game I might actually get the hang of it, but with my limited time playing I ended up being thrown an awkward shape I couldn't make a square with, sticking it in the corner and then screwing myself up and losing the game. This one didn't grip me, and I doubt it will grip anyone else. Rampage. What the actual f*** is this? Blakestone. I remember Blakestone. Apogee Software basically made a more space sci-fi version of Wolfenstein 3D here, and aside from the terrible 1 frame per year frame rate, this is probably a better game in nearly every way. The story is that Blakestone needs to break into Dr. Goldfire's tower and wipe out his genetic experiments, so it's not exactly Shakespeare. The game follows the standard Wolfenstein 3D format, finding a key and getting to the next level, but things here are a little more straightforward, as there's only 1 lift in 1 location on each floor, as opposed to Wolfenstein 3D, when there is an entrance and exit up 2 2 points in the level. This makes it far easier to find your bearings, as you know you're going to have to backtrack your way to the beginning of the stage again. There are also more interactivity options here too. You can pick up tokens, which you can use for food dispensers, which occasionally give you health items. And there are some scientists around who are actually informants, who may give you items and information if you talk to them. It's impossible to tell these guys apart from the enemy scientists though, so in a panic you might find yourself accidentally killing one of these guys one too many times. Unlike Wolfenstein 3D, there is actually a map of each stage, kind of. When you get in the lift, you can view a top-down view of the map, so if you're lost you can retreat to the lift and work out your bearings. This would have been a lot better, of course, if you could take this map with you, so you'd know where the hell you were in relation to everything else. This game also has a unique feature of being able to revisit levels you've already cleared. This means if you've left any health items laying around, you can return for these later. Quite an interesting quirk, and it allows for a welcome break if you are overwhelmed dealing with monsters or soldiers on the current floor you're on. The highlight of my time playing this demo is when I came across this giant broccoli monster on level 2, which I think makes the sound most people who eat broccoli for the first time make when they eat it. Brilliant game, which I'm sure I'll come back to. Nitemare 3D. So getting this game to run was a nightmare. I tried playing this game from the CD and it crashed on the first screen. This always happened to me as a kid, and as I'm using a much different PC now, it's likely the specific build of the game is the problem. I decided to play this another way, as it's worth showing off. Nitemare 3D is another first-person shooter. What sets it aside from Wolfenstein 3D is the variety of textures the game plays with. I played through the first level of this game and didn't feel at any point like I was lost, and always knew how to get to a certain point in the level. This is because the design of the levels utilises various enemies and other bits of furniture and scenery. As you can probably see, this is a haunted house style game, and the enemies consist of every classic horror trope you can think of. When I played this as a kid, all 2 screens of it as I couldn't actually play, it was terrifying. The overall vibe of dread you get while playing this game is still something I felt while playing today, and the graphics combined with a spectacular soundtrack helped create this. The game itself is again a jump up in quality from Wolfenstein 3D. There's even a point in this game where you can climb up to an attic to get a key, which is a very unique idea for a shooter game, and more in line with the point-and-click adventure games that were coming out around the same time. Great experience, but I'm going to turn this off before the display of the character's decaying face gives me more nightmares. Corridor 7. Whoa, Corridor 7. This game is a bit of a forgotten gem that came out around the same time as Doom, but actually used an engine more closely resembling Wolfenstein 3D. The idea is to locate all the aliens on the map, reach the elevator, and carry on with the rest of the game. I think this game is the best shooter I've played in this collection, for how smoothly it controls, and the fact you actually get a map you can look at any point. You start off with a weird assault rifle type gun and are put up against scary eye robots, weird gremlin type men, floating red eyeballs, big red bear gummy looking aliens, camouflage aliens, affectionately nicknamed the Wiki Wacky Woos, and this absolutely terrifying robot dude. As far as I know, this demo is a level which doesn't exist in the final game, and unless there's a problem with the sound setting, there's also some SFX missing. The game also presents you with doors you can't open until you get access by using a panel, health chambers and med packs which, you guessed it, restore your health, bullet dispensers and mines. The boss of this demo is the scary snorting robot, and the best way to kill him is to lure him out and press M to drop a mine. When you kill him, he drops a laser cannon, which is a much better weapon than the assault rifle you started with. This is interesting as it hints to you the additional weapons you can get in the game. The likelihood is that if you've beaten the robot, you've not got too many other enemies to kill, as he's the hardest one. So I think the idea here was to tease you enough to want to buy the full game. My dad still plays this game, and I have many fond memories of watching him play it and playing it myself. I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that between us, we've probably spent more time playing the game than the developers spent making it. Tubes. So in Tubes, Dr. Stereotype is experimenting with some new elements. His creativity is limited to naming them after the colours they are. The story goes that he's so convinced that he's going to win the Nobel Prize that the beaker falls over containing these elements, and you have to help him get all the elements back into it. This is a pretty weird framing device for a very dated puzzle game. This may have been pretty good when it came out, but it's the sort of thing that you could buy for about 8 pence on the App Store these days. The version I was playing also had no sound, so I had to tediously watch as the elements came around in order to be dropped into the beaker. The most annoying part was being challenged to match 2 3-piece chains of pinkium into the beaker. This was so boring, and I found myself feeling like I'd rather just watch paint dry. It's also weird to see Dr. All Scientists look like this standing next to a blackboard with equations on it that he couldn't possibly reach. If you look closely, standing on some books, which just about get him 2 or 3 foot up the blackboard. How does he change the equations at the top if he makes a mistake? Surely the idea of having a blackboard there is for convenience. Why is he surprised when the stupidity leads to disaster? Why am I still playing this game? So in conclusion, an interesting delve into a bygone era. Thanks for watching, and let me know what your favourite piece of shareware is in the comments below. See you later.